Hello everyone and welcome to part 3 of Froggies and Fever. I'm very excited for this part, however I have some bad news. If you hear any background noise, that's because my window is wide open and yes, it is pretty cold in here. But some people in my family sadly got corona and I'm trying my very best not to get it. So I'm getting all the precautions out here. So yeah, I apologize for any background noise. I apologize if I will be absent in the following weeks. Then that's probably because I got sick and I don't have a voice anymore. We try to avoid that, so let's go. Now that I think about it, it's kind of ironic considering the topic of the video. However, Rika in this video does not have corona. Just getting that out there. Upon arriving at the hospital, Rika was almost immediately examined. Oikawa tried not to think too much about why or how even the nurses looked worried when they looked at her. He solely focused on his daughter. She was given oxygen to aid her breathing and it helped, though she seemed to dislike the mask at first they put over her face. He calmed her while holding her in his arms as long as he could without interfering with the doctor's work. See, it's nothing bad. It helps, doesn't it? She nodded slowly. Her eyes were slowly closing again and she was clearly exhausted from the whole ordeal. Between tests and after having a sample of her blood taken, which had been a whole struggle on its own, they had to wait time and time again and it was nerve-wracking. He tried taking it as a good sign. They might be concerned for Rika, but not so concerned that she needed to be under constant observation. That was good, right? Daichi next to him used the break to update Suga on the situation. He had the fingers intertwined with one hand and held the phone with the other, trying to soothe the teacher's worries. Oikawa let his touch ground him while he gently rocked Rika back and forth, careful not to move the mask. She had stopped crying and her coughing had eased a little, though she was still burning up in his arms. Hey, it's going to be alright. He glanced over to his husband, who had put his phone away after reassuring their partners and now turning his attention to them. He smiled and gently reached out to brush a few strands of hair from Rika's face that were wet with sweat and sticking to her forehead. She's in good hands now. They'll make sure she's alright. Oikawa nodded slowly and carefully adjusted her in his arms. He knew this was part of being a parent when he agreed to adopt a child, but he never thought his concern for her would be so intense. It was similar to when his husbands were hurt, yet different. Rika was so vulnerable, so innocent that even a small cold seemed like an utterly undeserved punishment for the girl. Nothing in this world was allowed to make her suffer. He would offer up all of him to prevent her suffering. For his partners, he at least knew they could fend for themselves, but Rika needed him. She needed all of them, and he would be damned if he wouldn't try his best to do his part. His eyes were vigilant as he observed the doctor entering again with Rika's file in hand. Alright, we are still waiting for the result of the blood test, but as mentioned before, it is most likely an infection. Considering her high fever and struggle to breathe, I'd like to keep her in the hospital tonight for observation. Before, however, we'll do an x-ray of her chest. Why an x-ray? The infection seems to be affecting her lungs, so we need to figure out to what extent to take the appropriate actions. If it's critical or has the potential to become critical, we can see that on the x-ray. Oikawa instinctively held him more closely to his chest while Daichi nodded. They followed the doctor's and nurse's instructions while trying to gently wake up Rika again for her to be at least lucid enough for the last test. Iwaizumi woke up with a headache. When he noticed how dark it still was outside, he groaned. Why couldn't he just continue to sleep? He turned around to snuggle up to his boyfriend's to try just that when he found the bed empty. More so, it was almost cold again where they had slept beside him before. Alerted, he sat up. This wasn't normal. Despite his muscles aching and protesting and the cold claiming him the moment he let the blanket fall from his shoulders, he got up. He shivered a little but ignored it. In the living room he found Suga, who paced up and down as if waiting, or rather expecting, bad news. He always did that when he was nervous, specifically when he feared a bad outcome. Iwaizumi halted. His heart clenched. This wasn't a good sign. Koshi? His voice was still painfully raspy and his words followed a cough. Immediately Suga turned around and began to fuss over him again. Hajime, what are you doing out of bed? You should rest. He took his hand and pulled him over to the couch before pushing him to sit down and quickly draping a blanket over his shoulders. It felt like he barely even blinked before finding himself in his new position. He hissed as his head protested the sudden motion, and Suga, of course, noticed. He gently cupped his cheek and inspected his face, taking note of his slightly risen temperature and glossy eyes. Give me a second. I'll get you some ibuprofen. Afterwards, I can make us some tea. He was still tense, but his nervousness seemed to give way to determination as he had a goal once more. Something to do, or rather someone to care about, so for the moment, Iwaizumi bit his tongue. This certainly wasn't what he expected upon waking up, but he trusted Suga to tell him what was going on eventually when he was satisfied with the care he provided for him. That decision, however, came to waver when he finally got to ask. Where are the others? At the hospital. What? He tried to get up, but Suga held him down, and whether it was the shock or the sickness, he didn't know, but for once, he stood no chance against him. Don't worry, it wasn't an emergency like you think. Rika isn't... She is probably not in danger like that. He took a deep breath, causing him to cough again, and fought to get the fit under control as quickly as possible so he could get answers. Explain. He could barely get the word out and saw how Suga cringed in sympathy as he heard how painful it must have been. He soothingly patted over his back while starting. Rika's fever got worse, and she had struggled to breathe, so Daichi and Toto brought her to the ER to make sure it wasn't anything worse. Daichi called a few minutes ago. They took a blood sample and gave her oxygen. It's most likely just an infection her body couldn't handle very well. He leaned onto Iwaizumi, seeking support as much as he attempted to give it, and the trainer gently intertwined their hands. Alright. It'll be okay then, right? Suga nodded slowly, hiding his face against his neck. They'll keep us updated. We just have to wait. From his voice alone, Iwaizumi could tell how much he hated the idea. He clasped his hand tighter and soothingly rubbed his thumb over Suga's. The teacher always worried so much when it was about them. Iwaizumi appreciated it. He felt cared for and safe when he was by his side, but he wished Suga would allow himself to rest as well. He tried his best to soothe him while they waited for updates. News only came way into the night when Daichi informed them that they had done an X-ray, but luckily the results amounted to nothing too severe. Rika had been given medicine to fight off the infection and lower her fever, and they'd stay the night at the hospital for observation. He also told them when they'd be expected to be released tomorrow, and Suga promised he'd be there, despite Daichi trying to convince him otherwise since they had the car, but Suga was too stubborn to change his mind on this. So Daichi sighed and relented. In exchange, he asked him to get some more rest at least, and this time Iwaizumi intervened and promised him he'd see to that. As such, Suga begrudgingly let himself be guided back to the bed. What better way to spend waiting than falling asleep? No, Daddy, you're doing that wrong. Suga relaxed as he could hear Rika from the hallway just as he was about to enter her room. He had taken a day off, explaining that he needed to take care of a sick child who had been admitted to the hospital the night before. The school staff, logically, was very understanding and wished her a quick recovery. That part, at least, seemed to be coming true sooner rather than later. As he stepped inside, he found her playing with a toy stethoscope, pretending to examine Froggy while Oikawa played nurse, though she clearly wasn't satisfied with his assistance and corrected his technique on holding the plushie harshly. Suga smiled softly before announcing himself with a gentle knock against the wall. Daichi, who until now had been half asleep in a chair beside them, he had been the one staying up all night after all, startled awake and rubbed his eyes. Meanwhile, Rika turned around and excitedly tried to jump up, but Oikawa stopped her gently yet firm. She had a small IV attached to her hand and he had to keep her from accidentally ripping on it. Chichi! Hey, Little Red. It was his favorite nickname for her. She had a red cardigan she insisted on wearing whenever the weather called for a jacket. It brought out a red shine in her eyes that was bright and lively. Suga quickly made his way over to her bed, not to cause Oikawa any further troubles. He could hear Daichi behind them yawn, and Oikawa too looked tired but relieved. His eyes were focused on their daughter, and Suga could see all the care and love he held for her reflected in them. Just like him, he was grateful beyond words to see her so animated and lively again, happy. How are you feeling, honey? Great! He smiled and gently brushed a few of the dark strands from her face. The nurse gave me this and showed me how to hear the heart with it. She excitedly showed off her new toy stethoscope and explained to Suga with Froggy what the hospital staff had told her. He smiled and listened carefully while asking a question or two in between to show his interest. As she moved to read her what she remembered about the treatment she had gotten, Oikawa, still holding her to his side to make sure she wouldn't hurt herself, while explaining in her typical expressive manner and accidentally fall or damage the equipment, chimed in as well. Yeah, she was really brave. A little ladybug, weren't you? She nodded. And then they poked me with a needle, but it almost didn't hurt because I was so tired. Yes, and do you still remember the X-ray? It was that big machine that took photos of your bones. He wouldn't have been surprised if she had forgotten about that. After all, she had been really out of it yesterday. But they had shown her the pictures again this morning because she was so fascinated by everything they presented her with, so now she nodded again excitedly. Oh wow, that seems like quite the adventure. She grinned, but before she could talk more, a small cough interrupted her. Immediately Oikawa was there to pat her back and soothingly rock her back and forth. She seemed to have taken the whole hospital ordeal well, all things considered, but the sickness still seemed to frighten her, now that it had gotten this bad once. Immediately Suga handed her Froggy again, so she could hug him tightly to her chest. She was discharged that day, shortly after, and they received a prescription for an antibiotic effective against the infection. The doctor said, well, it was a good thing they had brought her to the hospital when they did. The worst was over now, and she showed no signs throughout the night of her condition worsening again. They were to trust their instincts as before and bring her back in should the symptoms get worse, similarly to yesterday night again, or not get better after 4 more days. Specifically, they needed to keep an eye on her breathing, which Suga would see to acutely. On the way back from the pharmacy, it was DaiSuga this time who shared the backseat with Rika and almost fell asleep in the process, while she seemed wide awake once more. Suga smiled as he observed her in the mirror playing with Froggy. And? Ready to tell Papa all the things you learned? She nodded and grinned widely, unable to sit still in her seat while Oikawa tried to open her seatbelt upon arriving home. He sighed. They had a lot of sleep to catch up on. He had no idea where Rika took the energy from. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this series. If you did, please consider leaving a like because it would really help me a lot and I could use that currently. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Furthermore, as always, tell me your favorite quote under the pinned comment or your favorite moment of this series in general, and tell me if I should make more of these kinds of videos of parents I use and with which kind of ships. Yes, I would be very curious which ships you want to see as parents. Special thanks as always goes out to my nerd knuckles. You help me produce these videos on such a frequent basis. Thank you so much. Here are my other social media, though even more interesting. Check out the Discord in the channel description. And yeah, wish me luck with this whole situation I'm currently facing at home. I'm trying to put out another video to tomorrow, which you will be able to see right here. And now, have a great day.
Some food in you. Step 3, you grow hard about what you want to be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing. Wake up.